All right, welcome back to the Atlanta Child Murders Revisited. It is 21 October. This is ATKID video number 3, and we're going to continue on this journey of um, the Atlanta Child Murders step by step. And where I left off, I'd given you an intro of what my world was like and how I ended up in this situation. And here we are, back at the scene of the crime, I guess you'd call it. Stewart Lakewood Shopping Center. Now, like I said, the different brands, it's been 40 something years, so it was either here or here. I'm not exactly sure which window it was. I'm leaning more towards this one. But like I said, in case you didn't hear my other video, I ended up getting this job when school got out, summer of 1980. School gets out about 6 June, and I think I started working here about a week or so later, maybe like mid-June. And again, how I got the job is my sister worked in a gift shop at the Hilton where my mom worked at a car rental place. The lady she worked with, her husband and her owned this Dipper Dan's ice cream shop since probably the 60s. They were just holding on to it to either sell it out or get some kind of money for it or something. I'm not sure what they were doing, but since it was summer, it was more busier. They needed some help. And so they needed a couple of people to work part-time. And I usually worked, I don't know exactly when and how much I worked because it's been 40 years, but I think I was working like maybe four nights a week, like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or something like that. And I think Saturday, Sunday, I worked maybe 8 hours. And then Tuesday, Thursday, I think I came in like about 4, and I left. I think it closed about 8 or so, something like that. I do remember working there after the sun went down in the summer. So if the sun goes down after 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I left, my parents would pick me up when it was dark. It had to be after 8 o'clock, right? You can just kind of figure reasoning with that. So that's what I'm saying, probably 8 o'clock. But I know I wouldn't come in there till 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, somewhere like that in the afternoon. It was never like during the day, except on Saturdays and Sundays. And I'm 14. I don't know anything. You're 14. I showed you my little world. That's all I knew. And then occasionally we would go up to Lenox with my parents, driving, or my brother driving. But my world was Cherry Hills and Riverdale Road, that kind of area. And that was kind of the limit. Anything else past that, I really didn't know much about. And, you know, the school that I went to was majority white. I mean, I'd say out of 100 kids, well, I guess there's what, 500 kids, 1,000 kids at my high school. But I was in junior high at this time. So say, and I don't know how many people were in my North Clayton Junior High, but say out of 500 kids, maybe 1 out of 10 was black. I There were Hispanic guys there. Very, very few. A lot of most Hispanics were Cubans, children of Cubans, because they were keeping some of the Cubans, the adult males, in the penitentiary there, and I think they let some of the kids out with relatives and they put them into schools so they'd be near their parents. I think that's what I was told. But anyway, so I I had a few black friends. I had one guy. He and I were both born on the same day at the same hospital, and so we used to run on saying we were twins. Of course, he was black, I was white. Different mother, different father. We used to say different mothers, but same father. like that. It was quite a funny joke. Um, let's see. So, I mean, I didn't have any black friends that were really, now that I think about it, I didn't really have any black friends that we hung out with. There was this one guy that I just mentioned that sometimes he would tag along with us, but for some reason, most of the time, it was just me and my 4 or 5 compadres. We were nerds playing Dungeons and Dragons. I think he was an athlete, and so he wasn't really into Dungeons and Dragons. I think he did. He went over to the comic book Dungeons and Dragons store with us off Riverdale Road and decided, God Almighty, you guys need to get some girlfriends. But when you're 13, 14, you don't have girlfriends. But anyway, so I didn't know a lot of black kids. Okay, I knew, we ran into black people because Atlanta, there's a lot of black people. But in my area where I lived, my very limited environment, I didn't have a lot of black people. I didn't encounter, especially kids. I saw black adults. My mom had black friends, and there was this girl that my mom went to high school with down in Macon. And in the 60s, right around when I was born, she started dating this black guy, which is like 66, almost unheard of, black and white couple. And she got pregnant and had a child. And of course, she was in her 20s. Um, and that girl, whenever my mom would go see her, because she lived up near Colony Square in Piedmont Park, and whenever she would go see her, I'm hanging out with this girl who's about a year or so younger than me, I believe. And she always used to chase me around, trying to give me a kiss. And I didn't think it's black girls. I just didn't like girls, white or black or Hispanic, because girls were no fun. They couldn't play. They didn't want to play army. They didn't want to get dirty. They didn't want to climb trees. They didn't want to, you know, play Dungeons and Dragons and shit like that. So they were boring. So when I was younger, she would try to kiss me, and she thought it was really funny. And my mom would kid me, "Did you like? Did you like it when she kissed you?" I'm like, "Oh no, God, she's a girl." Ugh. You know, that's just the way I felt about it when I was younger. Of course, I got older. By the time I get 14, I'm much more interested in girls. Because like in elementary school, I wasn't too interested in that many girls because they were like us, but they ran around in dresses and they couldn't play Dungeons and Dragons, or they couldn't play Star Wars, and they didn't want to play Army. They want to play with dolls and shit. And but then one summer, the summer of '78, we all went home, and then we came back in junior high, and all of a sudden, all these girls had boobies and started wearing bras, and I was like, well, "What happened to you? Did you get sick and you got swelling or something?" And so I tried to poke them in their chests, and they would slap me, and I got in trouble once for doing that because I was like, "Well, last year they were flat chested. Now they're like they got these swellings. I thought they were sick or something." But anyway, moving on. So I didn't have a lot of black friends, and yeah, I don't know why. It's just there just wasn't that many black guys um, around our school. It was North back then. It's completely flipped now. I think it's like majority black in Clayton County. I haven't been back there in 20 years or so, but um, it was a white suburb, mostly airline employees. That's the way it was. So I don't know why my parents allowed me to work here. Surely they knew this area. Surely they knew about the Atlanta child murders because my mom was talking about it. And surely she knew that many of these kids were disappearing around Stewart Lakewood, you know. So I don't know why they allowed me to work in this. I guess they did because the owner said he was going to be there. He assured my mom he was going to be there, and he would wave. It would come by and talk to them when they would drop me off, and he would, chat with them and stuff like that. And in the beginning, it was fine, but after about a week or so, he started leaving me for a couple of hours, and he's, "Oh, I'm going to the store." And the store was just right down there. There was another store around the corner, but then I started, he was longer and longer and longer. And then one time I started getting worried, and I came out the door here, and I'm looking, kind of looking around, because you could hear gunshots, boom, and then you could hear the police, woo, 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 So I was getting a little nervous, especially when it got dark. And we didn't have a lot of customers. I don't know why they thought they needed someone extra. I think he just wanted someone there so he could screw around with his girlfriend. Because one time I came out and I'm standing here and I'm eating my ice cream because there's nothing else to do. I saw him. I saw a car pull up. He gets out one side. His girlfriend gets out the other side. She comes around, gives him a kiss on the cheek, and then she goes into work. And then he comes back over here. And I said, well, who's that? And he says, well, that's the girl next door. We're just friends and stuff like that. So I'm 14. I'm not stupid. I haven't had sex, but I know, I've seen the inside of a Playboy and a Penthouse magazine with my friends. Okay. So we know what girls look like, and we weren't stupid. We know, that you're born from your mother and that your father and your mother get together. If you're running around thinking that your mother's a virgin, well, you probably need to go back to school. But your mother could be a saint, but she's no virgin, okay? But anyway, so we knew what was what, and they started. They weren't teaching a lot about sex ed. I don't even think they taught a sex ed class until I got into 10th grade. Not that you couldn't get pregnant when you were 12 or 13, a girl or something like that. I guess I'm still kind of fuzzy on that, even at my age, that I don't really keep track of women's biology. But I think as soon as you have your period, you you can get pregnant, right? That's the way it goes, right? Maybe I should read up on that, but I don't know. But I know I'm 59, pretty sad. Come on. I used to think until I was in my 30s that women, when they got pregnant, the baby was always upside down with the head pointing downward. And then I was shocked that an ex-girlfriend of mine who'd gotten pregnant, not by me, told me that no, the baby moves around and kicks you and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Like an alien baby? Oh, no thanks. Take that fucker out. I would not want to be pregnant with something twirling around in my stomach, That was no good. So let me just check my time here. All right. So I'm working here. It's boring, you know, summer. It's light till 7 o'clock at night, and then it's dark for about an hour, and then my parents come pick me up, and I go home. And after a while, I start telling my parents, like in July, hey, he's kind of taken off, and he didn't come back for a couple hours. And they're like, they were friends with his wife, and they're like, oh, don't cause any problems, just go along. And my parents were always, if you were a kid, the way my generation of parents were, all adults were right and could do no wrong, and all children were mischievous and needed to be watched after and kept in line. Okay, so a child could never that an adult was probably doing something he shouldn't be doing. I wouldn't even think about telling my mom that, I think he's screwing around with this girl next door. I never would have thought about that, because I would have been, my mom, first of all, my mom would have hauled off and backslapped me. Don't you dare say that about Mr. So and so. And I don't even remember the guy's name. But that's just the way it was back then. The adult, it wasn't, kids are to be quiet and yes sir, no sir all the time. We had a little bit more freedom than that, but you weren't allowed as a child to say anything derogatory bad about an adult, even if you knew it was true. Okay. And like, especially, my mom, she was Miss Gossip. She knew everything about everybody, and she would pretend, you'd have these conversations, I'm standing over beside her, and all the women seemed acted like this, they're like they're friends, and oh, you're dressed, you look so nice, and your hair's so nice, and oh, it's so great. And how are those kids? And, they never would say anything bad. And then as soon as that person got out of earshot, my mom and I would be walking back to the car. I said, oh my God, that poor woman. Her husband's a damn drunk and her daughter's running around with a damn whore. She's got two babies from two different daddies and, and her son's just getting out of jail. And I'm like looking back at him. Oh, I thought you were. And I can't stand that woman. All she does is nag, 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 and talk shit. And I'm like, Ma, I thought you liked that woman. Oh, no, no, no. You don't understand. It's just you have to be nice. This is like Southern fake bullshit. And that's one thing I just hated about South was all the fake fucking people. I don't know if this happens in the black community, but in the white community that I grew up in the South, oh my God. Especially when I was in high school, I never saw so many fucking fake people or heard so many fucking fake people in all my life. People just frauds, just outright fucking frauds, and just I anyway. I glad I got away from that, and I never saw that in Oregon. And there was another thing I never saw in Oregon also was and I'll just go it because this is part of the narrative of the Atlanta child murders, is the blatant, just aggressive homosexuality. I mean, to the point of like, I'm talking about older men chasing after little boys. I never saw this in Oregon, California. I was in the military. I lived in Texas. I never saw this. But when I was growing up, not just in this situation, everywhere in Atlanta, if you had to be on your toes because it seemed like there were gay middle-aged men running around grabbing ass on teenage boys like me and 20-year-olds like me. Of course, when I got old, they weren't that interested. But, I remember when I first moved to it, back to Atlanta, when I was like 19, I was looking for a roommate, and I'd read these classified ads in the newspapers, and it would say liberal. Okay, liberal. I thought they were Democrats. Okay, they probably were Democrats, but I mean, and I would call this guy up, and he was like, "Yeah, I got a room to rent. How old are you again? Oh, 19. Oh, wow, 19. You are 19. Oh, wow. Well, you definitely have to come over, And I would be like thinking that I had definitely had to come over because the room was going to be gone. And I get over there, and the guy's just like literally touchy feely all the time, all over me. And I'm backing up and moving away. And that's a nice room. You like the room? I can give it to you for half the price if you want, And I'm just like, okay. Oh, I'll think about it. Let me. I got this other place to check out. Well, there's no other place that's going to be like this. And I remember specifically, I went to a place. I eventually ended up living off of La Vista Road, but right there at La Vista and Cheshire Bridge, three guys had a house. They were looking for a fourth roommate, and I went in, and again, it was the same fucking thing. You had this older man, about 40 something, and about two of the guys, they were in their 20s, and there were a bunch of people in the living room, and they're like, wow, look at that. Oh, that's pretty good. And, I'm curious. So I went in there and I looked, and they're all watching a gay porno on video. And of course, I was like, nope, 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 nope. So I left immediately. But this is like everywhere. Everywhere I went, there were aggressive 40-year-old men, late 30s, middle-aged men, 50-year-old men, just like coming at you, you know. And I never had that when I was in Portland or any place else, And they got gay communities, and I'm being gay people. Okay, I'm bashing like predator gay men, and this kind of sets up the attitude, the pervasive of what the Atlanta child murders is about. I was feeling the symptoms of what was acceptance in Atlanta that led to the Atlanta child murders. Okay. I just, like before the Atlanta child murders, during the Atlanta child murders, and after, and it continues today. There is an aggressive underworld of, I'm not bashing homosexuals, okay? There are plenty of homosexuals that are good, abiding people, but there are predator, 30s, 40s, middle aged men that seek after young men for their thing, to get their rocks off. And they are very, very, I never saw anything like it. It was just unbelievable. But this is the same climate that bred the Atlanta child murders. Okay. Now, let's be really clear. There are homosexuals that aren't aggressive predators that go after younger men. Okay. So I guess you could say it's sort of like a funnel. I'm going to use this thing called the sales funnel because I do a lot of sales. Um, so at the top of this funnel, it's like an upside down pyramid. You may have the entire gay community. And below that, you may have people that will do things that maybe they normal church going people wouldn't do. They'll go to clubs, gay clubs, and make out with people they just met, go home with people they just met, stuff like that. And then below that, you have men, middle-aged men in the gay community that were always looking for younger men to groom, I guess you could say, whether they're homosexual or not. And some of those are in their 20s, and then, okay, that's fine. As long as they're consenting adults, you're not forcing them to do anything, that's your business. But in that group, you get smaller. There's a subset of men, everything else. There's good cops, there's bad cops, there's good doctors, there's bad doctors, there's good teachers, there's bad teachers. There's always going to be a subset of people that are going to do things that they shouldn't do. And then you're going to have those people that are going to want to abuse. Not that having sex with a child isn't abuse, but I'm talking about beat, strangle, draw blood, bite, handcuff, whip, all kinds of stuff. I mean, think of the craziness. There are people like that will want to do that. Illegal, everything. And they should go to prison. I personally think that if you're chasing after little boys and little girls, and especially if you've hurt them, like beat them or killed them, you should never get out of prison. Never. Ever, ever, ever. There's no treatment for that. Those people are going to, I'm going to come over a guy named John David Norman. I think he died in his 70s, almost 80 years old, still chasing after little boys to do whatever to. Okay? So that, but even with that, even if you're a sexual predator who has sex with little boys and you beat them or chain them up or kidnap them, not all of those people, very few of them will ever kill them. Okay? And even if they do kill one, not very, 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 very few will become serial child killers. Now, I know people are saying, well, what's the difference? Who cares? What I'm trying to say is that if you have 1,000 predators, sexual predators in Atlanta, very rarely, maybe two in 40 years will you have, of which one of those was Wayne Williams. That's what I'm trying to tell you, how rare this Atlanta child murders is. Because first you have to have the environment, and you have a thriving homosexual community in Atlanta. It is that way because you don't have a thriving homosexual community in other places in Georgia. That's where they feel safe. Okay. Now, this is not bashing homosexuals. Again, understand heterosexuals do devious things and child predator things too, also. Okay. But you need that environment for the Atlanta child murders to exist. Okay. And in that environment, like I said, you're going to have people that are going to go after younger men in their 20s, and then you're going to have people that go in for kids underage, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, even worse. Okay. And then I'm just recapping again. Not all of those people are going to be violent. What they're doing is wrong, but it doesn't mean they're going to kill the children. Okay. I know it's hard to see the difference, but it is. There's a big difference. And then, even if you do have children, people that beat children or hit them or chain them up or something, it doesn't mean they're going to kill them. And then, even if this guy does kill one, doesn't mean he's a serial killer out there looking to kill a whole series of them. Maybe he killed one by accident. Maybe the person threatened to tell and he killed them. Doesn't mean that guy is going to turn into a serial killer. Now, what I think would happen with Wayne Williams is somewhere in there, he was abused, and somewhere in there, he's reliving. I go through the psychology of this. He's reliving that moment when he was abused, and he's taking the power back. So no longer when he's abusing these kids, he's killing these kids, he's taking his power back. It's the wrong way to do it. If you've been abused as a child, you should seek mental health counseling, not go out and kill other children to take your power back. But that's what I believe happened with Wayne Williams. That's one aspect of it. Now, why he's killing these kids, I'll get into those things, multiple reasons. But I think what drives it is he was probably abused. We find that 99.9% of these killers that involve children were always sexually abused as children. And now they're adults. They replace themselves as the victim and become the victimizer, the abuser, to gain the power. Because when they're a child, you think that person, that person has the power over you because you can't get away. You're stuck. They're choking you. They're beating you. They're having their way with you. They have the power. So when you become an adult, some people recover the wrong way and they start abusing children as a way of recovering that power they lost as a child. Now, I know it sounds weird. I know it sounds strange, but I've read a lot about this, talked to a lot of people about this, and this is what's going on in the person's mind. Now, whether that's going on in Wayne Williams' mind, I don't know. We can't get in Wayne Williams' mind and find out. But 99.9% of the people that abuse children, this is exactly what is going on. No longer they're the abused. Now they have the power. They're claiming taking it back, and they're the abuser. Okay? You notice that several of the children that Wayne Williams went after with were gifted. They were in the gifted program. They were smart. They were sort of like he was when he was little. Okay? So that's right there. And he's going to ask them, hey, what do you like to do? Things like that. We've got this some testimony from people that weren't killed by Wayne Williams, but were children. So back to me here at this different end. So let's see. But what I'm saying about, again, don't get me wrong about homosexuals. Homosexuals have every right to be homosexual, like everybody else, like you and me, as long as they're not breaking the law. Okay, as long as they're not going after children. Not all homosexuals go after children, just like not all heterosexuals are going after children. There's a big difference. But in the context of the Atlanta child murders, you have to have this very aggressive homosexual community for the Atlanta child murders to exist. It wouldn't exist in any other city. It wouldn't exist in Savannah. It wouldn't in some instances, but on the massive scale that happened here, this was the bubble that it existed in. An aggressive, um, I think it's a word for it, pedestric, where older men are going after younger men. Okay, pedastry. I think I don't remember that. I just remember reading about Sparta, and I think that's what they tried to describe it as. Um, so anyway, I was working here, and we'll just get right into it. I'm not going to be as emotional as I was before. So my world was in here. Very rarely came outside, especially when I would hear the police sirens and the gunshots. And like I said, if I stood out here all day and looked around at people going in and out of the stores, probably 95 out of 100 people would be black, African American. People I really didn't have associations with or back in my hometown. So I didn't really know that many people. And then there were white people, a few white people, very, very, very few. I mean, like, there was me, there was the owner, there was that white girl. Oh, yeah, she was white too. That's right. That's probably why he picked up on her, because she was the only white girl around. And maybe I saw a few others, and that was it. That was basically it. Okay. Out of 100 customers coming in, maybe one or two would be white. Okay. So there were white poor people that still lived in the area that would go to this grocery store. Okay. But the vast majority were African Americans. And nothing wrong with that. It's just the way it was. In America, you know, these areas are built up in the 50s and 60s, and you have white flight, and then the population, you know, gets like that. That's just the way America is. Okay. So I'm here. I'm doing my ice cream bit. And one day, this young guy, I don't know, maybe, I don't, I can't remember the ages very well. Um, and I'll tell you the truth. Black guys, the saying where they all look the same. Well, they didn't all look the same, but it was harder for me to tell the difference at a distance between black people and white people. Because, white people have red hair, they have brown hair, they have black hair, they have blonde hair. A lot of more white people are fat. You know, it's I'm probably sounding racist here, but I'm just saying that my world, I didn't interact with a lot of black people. Okay. And so anyway, so I'm there, and one afternoon, I think it was about 7 o'clock, because it was dark, this kid shows up, and the first thing I noticed, it was kind of interesting. It's July, and he has on a members only jacket, and I think it was kind of burgundy, maybe, if I remember correctly. He had on kind of these burgundy shoes and these kind of brown rust kind of pants that kind of flared out. You know how we had bell bottoms at the time. He had short, a little bit curly hair, but cut very short. And then I had this big, huge afro that stuck out. And it just reminded me here. Let me show you something in case you haven't seen already. Hold on. Let me put this on pause. All right. So this is me right here. Now, of course, I don't look anything like that nowadays, but that was me in my glory years. I think I'm probably 11 years old when this picture's taken. Um, I had an afro from like 77, 76, 77 to about mid 80, 82, 83, something like that. Sometime in high school, I got rid of it. Because I think I was going in the military. But that was me. And that was pretty short. Usually it hung down in my face, hung down all like this. And this is, like, again, probably 1977, 70, the summer 77, 78. So probably like 2 years before. And of course, I'm playing like Starsky and Hutch. We always played cops and robbers, army, and stuff like that. And so we're walking down our street in Cherry Hills. This is on Shoreham Boulevard. And my friend had a camera, and so I took a He took a picture of me, and I was like doing my best, Starsky and Hutch pose there. And I rarely wore a shirt. I ran around and was just dirty all the time. It's my once my mom made me get this afros because I didn't have to comb it. I could just get in the shower, take a bath, shake it out, and I was good. And I had a pick and everything. And people would make fun of me, and say, "Hey, you gonna go hang out with the Soul Brothers?" And I'm like, "Fuck you, man! Fuck you, jive turkey!" Like that. I was always like imitating JJ, Jimmy Walker, JJ Walker. You know, that's what I thought. I always had a good time, but I love my afro. I really miss it. I wish I could grow my afro back, but it doesn't matter how much I grow my hair. Like I'm 59 now, it kind of stays the same length, but it just gets thicker and hotter. And I'm at this age where I'm just hot all the time. No matter what I do, no matter how much water I drink, no matter how much air conditioning it is, my body temperature is always hot. Could have something to do with my personality, but that's me right there. So if anyone ever wanted to recognize who I was, but of course you can't see my face, you just see my afro. My friends want me to put this picture in my high school annual, but I'm like, hey, I'm like 11 years old. That's not me when I was, you know, 18. But that was me. And then during the summer of 1980, I had that afro. I'm standing here behind the counter reading my little book and chomping on my ice cream. And this cat comes walking in, and he's a pretty cool dude. He's like, "Hey man, what's up? What's your name, man? You're new here, huh? I ain't seen you before. Where's that old dude? Where's the other cat that was here?" I guess this guy never hired any black guys. He goes, "Hey, how come your boss never hires any black guys? Any brothers?" And he's like, "He's always hiring these white kids, you know, and they never last. Every week there's a new kid, you know." And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And and like I said, I'm like 14. He's probably, I want to say he's older than me. So he's probably 16, 17 years old. And he goes, "Yeah, I want some of this ice cream." And so I get him the ice cream, and being stupid, because, I'm a trusting kind of stupid kid. I give him the ice cream, and he's like, "Well, thanks." He takes a lick out of it. He goes, "Thanks, thanks." Starts to turn around and walk out. And I'm like, "Hey, you need to pay for that." And he goes, "No, man, the owner, he lets me get him for free." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I don't have a list of anybody who gets the ice cream for free from the owner." So, I was 14, so I wasn't stupid. And so I grabbed the keys, and he's over there standing, and I said, "Are you going to pay me or not?" And he's like, "No, man, it's like, what, 50 cents maybe?" So I go over there and I lock the door. And I said, "You're not leaving till you pay me." And he goes, "Man, you better open that damn door and let me out of here." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, just go ahead and pay me." And he goes, "No, dude, I'm telling you, you need to open that damn door and let me out." And so he starts to chase me. And I had gone around back. Now, before, because of all the shootings and the police and stuff, I had got a pipe and a knife, and I put behind the counter. And I went behind the counter and I pulled this out, because I was used to fighting, because I was a fighter, from a very young age. I was always the one starting the fights on the playground, and I was that kid, that kid that would fuck you up in the playground. That was me. I wasn't the bully, but I didn't take shit off nobody, and I was always ready to go. I'm not like that now, but so I was ready to rumble, ready to go. Okay, and matter of fact, I just read this book called "That Was Then and This Is Now" and Rumblefish, and the whole series of books, which I thought was really interesting. Why they would let kids in junior high, 13, 14-year-olds, read about all these gangs. But it was an interesting book. But I remember reading that, and I tried to act my toughest. And I said, "Yeah, it's kind of stupid now if you think about it. You're gonna slam down and stab some kid over fucking 50-cent ice cream. Probably wasn't even that much. But I was 14, didn't know any better, and I was scared because he was bigger than me. So he starts chasing me around, and I was like, I hit him with the pipe, and he backed off. And he goes, "Hey man, I'm gonna fuck you up. You hit me again." And he grabbed one of the chairs, and he started like going toward me. And I knew I didn't stand a chance against a chair. So I had the keys in my pocket. So I went over to the door and I said, "Look, look, look, just get the fuck out of here." And I unlocked the door, and then I went around back to behind the counter, and he said, "Yeah, man, well, I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you for sure." And he went out the door, and he kind of gave me a look back and kind of strutted off. And so then the owner came back, and I told him what happened. He goes, "Oh, don't worry, it's just some kid. You should just let him go. No big deal. No point getting hurt." And he just blew it off. And I told my dad, and I said, "Dad, I want to quit." This is like, "Oh no, you can't quit. It's just probably just some punk trying to see how tough you are. You don't worry about that kid. And well, what if he comes back? No, he's not going to come back. The manager's there." And I'm like, "Well, he wasn't there then." And so my parents wouldn't let me quit. And so like 2 days later, I'm back there again, and I don't see anything. So about a week or so later, I don't know exactly when, and I think this happened maybe the beginning of July. So I've been there about a month. Yes, maybe a. And so then about a week later, now I could be wrong about this, but I could have swear that the parking spaces were straight in right here like this. I could have sworn they were like that, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Or maybe they were just straight in here and they put them in later at an angle. Who knows? I don't remember exactly. Or they could have been just like that. But I just remember one day, and it was during the day. It was probably about 4 or 5. It was still sunlight. About a week later, I'm sitting here in my chair behind the counter, and I look and I see this white, not really white, it's like a cream colored 2-door big LTD. And it has, like, you know how they have those black vinyl or leather half tops on the back there? And it was 2 doors. And this car pulls up, and the windows were kind of foggy, which I thought was weird because it was July, you know. And I see these two black guys lean forward. One guy's holding the steering wheel, and he has a big, bushy afro, and he has these big Coke bottle glasses, and he has this kind of flared out collar with a black and white spotted shirt. And then I see my ice cream thief in the passenger seat, and he's pointing at me sitting there. And they kind of lean over, they cock their heads together, they kind of lean over, and they're chatting, and he's pointing at me, and I'm like, oh fuck, he's brought somebody, they're gonna come kick my ass. And so before I got a chance, because stupidly I had the keys way back on the end of the counter with my knife and pipe, so I run back to get that, but by the time I got right here, that cool cat had got out of the car, and he had walked all the way to the door, and he didn't open the door. He just went to the window, and he kind of took 2 fingers and pointed at me, and then he kind of took his thumbs and kind of pointed back at the guy in the car, and he kind of smiled and gave me this big grin, and then he took his hands and bashed them on the glass, like up here. Boom. And he made out this howl, like, and he's just these big white eyes, and I thought they were going to come in and kill me, or beat me up, or whatever, teach me probably beat me up, teach this little white punk a lesson. And so then he just went off to the side, and I didn't see him anymore. And I'm standing here, I've got the pipe, and I've got the knife kind of to my side, kind of pointing down, so they can't see it. And I'm behind the counter. And he goes off. And as soon as he goes off, out pops this kind of chubby guy that was probably about 4 or 5 years older. So maybe in his early 20s. And again, he had an afro, a big bushy afro. He had these big Coke bottle glasses. His collar, I just always remember his collar was flared out. And he had this, it had like white, and it was like a white shirt, and it looked like a cow, like somebody had taken black paint and sprayed on it. And he had, again, I want to say like burgundy shoes or burgundy pants, and they were flared out at the bottom. And he walks up, grabs the door, and walks in. And this is when my life changed for the next 40 something years. And he walks in, and he doesn't say anything. He just kind of looks me up and down. And then he does this thing where he lowers his lenses on his glasses and is kind of looking at me right underneath the top of his glasses. And he kind of grabs his chin like he's assessing me, you know? And I'm standing there trying not to show him I have this pipe and knife. And I think he knows that I have something, but didn't know what it is. He's trying to figure it out because he can see through the glass a little bit, but it's foggy because there's like, it's glass right here. And then down below, it's just machinery. And then it's like a freezer where they put the ice cream in these buckets here. And so he steps forward a little bit, And he goes, "Hey, dude, what's up?" And I'm like, "Oh, not much." And he goes, "Yeah, you're kind of new around here, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then he kind of cocks his head and he looks and he zeroes in on my name tag, and it was Dino. That's my name, Dino. And his eyes kind of light up, and he goes, and he looks back at me, and he looks at the name tag, and he looks back at me, and he's like, "Dino? Oh wow, what an interesting name. A white guy named Dino. Wow. What are you doing here, Dino?" And he says it in kind of a sarcastic way. And he goes, "Aren't you a little bit out of your neighborhood?" And I said, "No, no, this is my job. I'm working here." And he goes, "Well, where's that owner?" And I said, "He's gone to the store. He'll be back any minute now." Because I'm thinking the other guy is going to come in now. And he goes, "Well, I want one of those ice creams." He got, I don't know, peach or whatever it was. And I gave him the ice cream. But before I gave him the ice cream, I made sure he paid me. I kind of the ice cream toward him. And then he went to grab for it and I held it back. And he kind of chuckled and laughed and looked at me again at an angle and kind of chuckled and laughed. And, "Oh, yeah." And then he reached in his pocket and he gave me the money. And he goes, "Well, aren't you a little bit, lost? Don't you don't you think you don't belong here?" And I go, "No, no, I belong here. My parents, they know the owners." And he could tell I was nervous. And he goes, "Well, I don't know, man. I don't really think you're on your side of town. Maybe you need to go back to wherever it is you came from. Because this is our side of town, man." And I go, "This is America. I can work wherever I want." He's like, "America, yeah. Yeah, you're not in America anymore, man. You're not in America anymore. You're in our territory. This ain't America. Why don't you go back to America, you little white suburbs?" And with that, he licked his ice cream and he goes, "I'll be seeing you later, Dino. Real soon." And then he kind of spun around like the Jacksons do. He spun around, faced the doorway, and he walked off. And when he walked off, he looked back at me. "Catch you later, Dino." And he walked off and he went off and he got in his little car and he looked at me again and he eyeballed me the whole time he was driving off. Now I'm enough to finish this. I got 8 minutes, maybe. So I was really scared then. I thought he was definitely going to come back with his buddy, and especially, I'm this white kid in the wrong part of town. I'm not, go back, all this stuff was going through my head and stuff I've never really even thought about until just like recently. You're not in America. Wow. But anyway, so he took off. I was shaking, literally shaking. I dropped the pipe. I dropped the knife. I was just, I probably peed my pants. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die. I didn't know why. I just knew there was something about this guy that made me very, very nervous. He was just fat, chubby guy. He wasn't like built like the other guy. The other guy was taller. And, he could have fucked me up. Um, and so again, same repeat. I told the owner, told my dad I wanted to quit. "No, you can't quit." "Well, it's just they're just trying to fuck with you. You got your money, right?" "Yeah, okay, yeah, no problem." "Well, fuck it. Don't let those guys intimidate you. Be a man," my dad would say. "Stop being a pussy," my dad would say. You're fucking 14, and in 4 more years you'll be an adult, and you're gonna run around being a pussy. And my dad was always making fun of me, saying I was a mama's boy. Because I was a mama's boy. I hung out with my mom most of the time. You know, 'Cause my dad was always working. You're gonna hang out of your mom's skirt all the time. You're gonna you know, I might as well start buying you dresses for Christmas. You're gonna start wearing some fucking dresses, and I'll get you some makeup. How about that? I'm like, yeah, of course you can't tell your dad. "Fuck you, Dad." No, you can't tell him that because he'll beat my ass. And my dad's like, "Look, we're gonna go fishing next weekend. Yeah, well, I'll take you. We'll do some real man things, okay? I know you don't like to go hunting. You don't like guns, but hey, your mom's a good shot too. She's really good with a gun. I'm like, thanks, Dad. That's nice to know. And but yeah, I think come this Christmas, definitely buying you some dresses and some high heel shoes. I'm like, fuck